3 armed security guards pounding on my door at 6 a.m. Was not exactly how I planned to start my vacation. "You have 48 hours to vacate this property." One of them barked while shoving an envelope in my face. The seal read, "Pinecrest Lake Homeowners Association." I barely had time to register the words before they turned and marched back to their spotless white SUV. What they didn't know was that they had just ignited a war they couldn't win. 3 months earlier, I inherited my grandfather's lake cabin after he passed away at 92. I hadn't been back to Pinecrest Lake in nearly 20 years. Not since my parents' divorce ended our summers there. But something about the cabin called to me after a brutal tax season at my job as a forensic accountant. I needed peace. And the lake was peace. Or so I thought. The cabin looked just as I remembered it, A-frame nestled in the trees. The old deck overlooking the glassy lake. The dusty fishing gear left untouched. That first night, I sat on the deck with a beer and watched the sun melt into the water. For the first time in years, I felt my shoulders unclench. I was home. Then came the eviction notice. According to the papers, I was trespassing on HOA property. They claimed the cabin encroached 50 feet over the boundary and that I owed $25,000 in fines. I stood there barefoot in my pajamas, clutching a coffee mug, completely blindsided. My grandfather owned this place for over 50 years. How could they possibly say it wasn't mine? The next morning, I walked down to the dock, trying to clear my head. That's when I met Earl, my grandfather's old fishing buddy. He told me everything. Apparently, the HOA president, a woman named Dana Cartwright, had taken over a few years ago and turned the community into her personal kingdom. She wanted to turn Pinecrest Lake into a luxury resort and was bullying longtime homeowners into selling. My grandfather had resisted until the end. I spent the next few hours digging through the cabin, looking for any paperwork. That's when I found a folder labeled Property Deed, Original Survey. Inside was the original 1964 survey, along with hand-drawn maps and a journal where my grandfather had detailed every boundary dispute he'd ever faced. The papers clearly showed that the land extended all the way to the shoreline, including the dock. Not only was I not trespassing, but the HOA had actually built their new dock on my water rights. Earl confirmed my suspicions. Dana had been renting out dock space to tourists at $300 a weekend, using my property to do it. That night, I sat on the deck and reread my grandfather's journal. One entry stood out. Cartwright came by again, offered to buy the land for a third of its worth. Told her no. She said new rules were coming. The next day, a woman named Harper showed up unannounced, snapping photos of my property. She turned out to be my northern neighbor and an environmental attorney. When I told her what was happening, she nodded grimly. Dana pulled the same stunt on me when I moved in. I fought back. You should too. She looked over my grandfather's documents and her eyes widened. This changes everything, she said. These old deeds include riparian rights. That means you own not just the land to the water, but the access itself. Without your shoreline, their whole condo marina plan collapses. I drove to the county assessor's office and requested the latest records. Sure enough, just months before his death, my grandfather had filed for a property reassessment and it had been finalized. The official documents matched the original survey. I legally owned everything they claimed I was trespassing on. Armed with that, I showed up to the next HOA meeting. Dana tried to shut me down, saying the meeting wasn't the appropriate forum. I held up the county documents. You've been renting my dock for profit. I have proof. I want it stopped immediately. Murmurs filled the room. Dana's smile froze. One of her board members whispered something in her ear. She abruptly adjourned the meeting. The next morning, I found my water and electricity shut off. A notice said it was for emergency maintenance. Harper helped me install solar panels and a filtration system. If they wanted a war, they picked the wrong guy. I used my forensic skills to start digging into HOA finances. It didn't take long to find irregularities. Transfers labeled community upgrades had gone straight to Dana's private development firm. We built a case. We collected footage of HOA workers trespassing, harassing, and even attempting to break into my cabin. My grandfather's clock, which I discovered contained a hidden camera, captured Dana herself ordering people to find the documents. I filed for an emergency injunction. At the hearing, the judge was skeptical until we played the footage. His demeanor changed instantly. A restraining order was granted. The HOA was barred from my property. Utilities had to be restored. And most importantly, the judge ordered a full audit of the HOA's financials. That night, I removed the unauthorized community dock sections from my water rights area. I did it legally. The next morning, the boats were floating aimlessly at the public marina. Dana showed up fuming. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she snarled. "Oh, I think I do," I replied. More neighbors came forward. An elderly couple who'd been fined for having garden gnomes. A widowed teacher who was told her porch furniture violated aesthetic standards. Dana had bullied everyone. But now the community had seen the truth. At the next meeting, I presented everything: financial records, surveillance footage, property deeds. When the board tried to silence me, a familiar voice spoke up. It was the county harbor master. "I've reviewed Mr. Blake's documents. His claims are valid. That dock was built illegally." Gasps filled the room. Dana lost it. "You people are ungrateful. That lakefront was a dump before me." Someone filmed her meltdown. It went viral. She was removed as president by unanimous vote. Her company folded days later after the state froze her assets and launched a fraud investigation. The community changed after that. I stayed and made the cabin my permanent home. We rewrote the HOA bylaws, launched a legal defense fund, and turned Pinecrest Lake back into what it was always meant to be: a place for neighbors, not tyrants. And as for Dana, last I heard, she was managing a strip mall in Reno. I sent her a framed copy of my property deed, just to remind her what happens when you mess with the wrong lake cabin.